Hi, Cubs. It's Miss Candleberry. So we're going to continue today with our Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone read aloud. We're on page 176. 78. Excuse me. Right now, I want you to take a moment to see if you can remember all the way back to last week. What was the last thing that we read about? I'll give you a clue. It has to do with Nicholas Flamel. So if you remember that Nicholas Flamel, we found out that Nicholas Flamel made this thing called the Sorcerer's Stone, which turns things into gold, but also makes it so that somebody is immortal. And we know from our prefix last week that M means not. So it means not immortal, which means they could never die. So now we know why somebody might want to come to Hogwarts and steal this thing. All right, I'm going to start here and I'll follow along kind of with my finger a little bit. But there's no pictures right now. So when we get to the next page, I'll just move the book over. The next morning in Defense Against the Dark Arts, we're copying down different ways of treating werewolf bites. Harry and Ron were still discussing what they'd do with the Sorcerer's Stone if they had one. It wasn't until Ron said he'd buy his own Quidditch team that Harry remembered about Snape coming to the match. "I'm going to play," he told Ron and Hermione. "If I don't, all the Slytherins will think I'm just too scared to face Snape. I'll show them. It'll really wipe the smiles off their faces if we win." "Just as long as we're not wiping you off the pitch," said Hermione. As the match drew nearer, however, Harry became more and more nervous. Whatever he told Ron and Hermione, the rest of the team weren't to come either. The idea of overtaking Slytherin in the house championship was wonderful. No one had done it for nearly 7 years. But would they be allowed to with such a biased referee? Harry didn't know whether he was imagining it or not, but he seemed to keep running into Snape wherever he went. At times, he even wondered whether Snape was following him, trying to catch him on his own. Potions lessons were turning into sort of a weekly torture. Snape was so horrible to Harry. Could Snape possibly know they'd found out about the Sorcerer's Stone? Harry didn't see how they could, yet he sometimes had the horrible feeling that Snape could read minds. Harry knew, when they wished him good luck outside the changing rooms the next afternoon, that Ron and Hermione were wondering whether they'd ever see him alive again. It wasn't what you call comforting. Harry hardly heard a word of Wood's pep talk as he pulled on his Quidditch robes and picked up his Nimbus 2000. Ron and Hermione, meanwhile, had found a place in the stands next to Neville, who couldn't understand why they looked so grim and worried, or why they both brought their wands to the match. Little did Harry know that Ron and Hermione had been secretly practicing the Leglocker curse. They got the idea from Malfoy using it on Neville, and were ready to use it on Snape if he showed any sign of wanting to hurt Harry. "Now, don't forget, it's locomotor mortis," Hermione muttered. Ooh, I read that wrong. So let me go back and read that correctly. "Now, don't forget, it's locomotor mortis," Hermione muttered as Ron slipped his wand up his sleeve. "I know," Ron snapped. "Don't nag." Back in the changing room, Wood had taken Harry aside. "Don't want to pressure you, Potter, but if we ever need an early capture of the snitch, it's now. Finish the game before Snape can favour Hufflepuff too much." "The whole school's out there," said Fred Weasley, peering out the door. "Even, blimey, Dumbledore's come to watch." Harry's heart did a somersault. "Dumbledore," he said, dashing to the door to make sure. Fred was right. There was no mistaking that silver beard. Harry could have laughed out loud with relief. He was safe. There was simply no way that Snape would dare to try to hurt him if Dumbledore was watching. Perhaps that was why Snape was looking so angry as the teams marched onto the pitch, something that Ron noticed too. "I've never seen Snape look so mean," he told Hermione. "Look, they're off. Ouch!" Someone had poked Ron in the back of the head. It was Malfoy. "Oh, sorry, Weasley. Didn't see you there." Malfoy grinned broadly at Crabbe and Goyle. I want you to take a moment, and I want you to think about how you would feel if you were Ron. What would your next thing be? Let's make a prediction. What would you do if you were Ron and you just got poked in the head by Malfoy? All right, let's see if your prediction came true. I wonder how long Potter's going to stay on his broom this time. Anyone want to bet? What about you, Weasley? Ron didn't answer. Snape had just awarded Hufflepuff a penalty because George Weasley had hit a bludger at him. Hermione, who had all of her fingers crossed in her lap, was squinting fixedly on Harry, who was circling the game like a hawk looking for the snitch. You know how I think they choose people for the Gryffindor team, said Malfoy loudly a few minutes later, as Snape awarded Hufflepuff another penalty for no reason at all. It's people they feel sorry for. See, there's Potter, who's got no parents. Then there's the Weasleys, who've got no money. You should be on the team, Longbottom. You've got no brains. Neville went bright red, but turned in his seat to face Malfoy. I'm worth 12 of you, Malfoy, he stammered. Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle howled with laughter. Go ahead, howl with laughter a little bit. All right. Howl with laughter, but Ron, still not daring to take his eyes from the game, said, You tell him, Neville. Longbottom, if brains were gold, you'd be poorer than Weasley, and that's saying something. Ron's nerves were already stretched to the breaking point with anxiety about Harry. I'm warning you, Malfoy. One more word. Ron, said Hermione suddenly. Harry! What? Where? Harry had suddenly gone into a spectacular dive, which drew gasps and cheers from the crowd. Hermione stood up, her crossed fingers in her mouth, as Harry streaked toward the ground like a bullet. You in luck, Weasley. Potter's obviously spotted some money on the ground, said Malfoy. Ron snapped. What does it mean, Ron snapped? We don't mean like snap. What do they mean? Now, if you said or thought, well, snapped means that he couldn't take it anymore, he got really angry, then you're right. Before Malfoy knew what was happening, Ron was on top of him, wrestling him to the ground. Neville hesitated, then clambered over the back of a seat to help. Come on, Harry! Hermione screamed, leaping onto her seat to watch as Harry sped straight at Snape. She didn't even notice Malfoy and Ron rolling around under her seat, or the scuffles and yells coming from the whirl of fists that was Neville, Crabbe, and Goyle. Neville's fighting both Crabbe and Goyle. Up in the air, Snape turned on his broomstick just in time to see something scarlet shoot past him, missing him by inches. Next second, Harry pulled out of the dive, raised his arm in triumph, and the snitch clasped it in his hand. The stands erupted. It had to be a record. No one could ever remember the snitch being caught so quickly. Ron, where are you? The game's over. Harry won. We've won. Gryffindor are in the lead, shrieked Hermione, dancing up and down on her seat and hugging Parvati Patil in the row in the front. Harry jumped off his broom, a foot from the ground. He couldn't believe it. He'd done it. The game was over. It had barely lasted 5 minutes. The Gryffindor came spilling onto the pitch, and he saw Snape laying nearby, white-faced and tight-lipped. Then Harry felt a hand on his shoulder and looked up into Dumbledore's smiling face. Well done, said Dumbledore quietly so that only Harry could hear. Nice to see that you haven't been brooding about that mirror. Been keeping busy. Excellent. Snape spat bitterly on the ground. All right, we're going to stop there for today. I want you to make a quick prediction about what Harry's going to be doing or thinking about now that the Quidditch game is over and he's safe on the ground. So, if you have a moment, type your prediction after the video. All right, guys. I'll post a different video for shared reading in a little while.